let me take you back to 1943. I was 8 years old, and it was in the middle of World War II. Just like COVID, we couldn't go anywhere. There were no lights on, you could do nothing, but there were local events. And I was entered into an 80-yard race, a sprint, and I won the race. Of course, I had my secret weapon. I had Foster's spike shoes, and nobody else had even heard of spike running shoes. So I won, and I went up to pick up my prize. What did I get?
The living legend, Joe Foster, is the co-founder of Reebok.
The one and only Joe Foster.
We have Joe Foster, founder of Reebok.
Welcome to the Redefined podcast, brought to you by the One Club, the world's first invite-only digital private members club. The ambition of this podcast is to explore the untold stories of entrepreneurs, athletes, influencers, and more.
How are you, Joe?
I'm just checking. This is okay? Right. Gordon, thank you for the invitation.
No,
it's great.
It's great. I'm really looking forward to this, actually. Yeah.
It's really nice to be here. Yeah. And it's nice to be a member of this One Club. It's a fantastic idea. I hope anybody here who isn't a member, you should check it out. I tell you, networking, brilliant. And you'll enjoy it.
Yeah.
We have been picked, Julie and myself, we have been picked up by many clubs, but this is something special, and we're really pleased to be here tonight.
Yeah, no, and we're pleased to have you here. So, I mean, I guess the first question I'd love to ask is, how did the name Reebok come to be?
Reebok, well, we're obviously starting halfway through the story, but it's a good part. The story started with my grandfather. My grandfather, he invented the spike running shoe. And we might get back to where my grandfather had a wonderful career. He developed a wonderful brand, and he understood, probably being an entrepreneur, mainly an influencer. He was a great influencer. But his company, which he started, believe it or not, in 1895, almost died with him, but his sons took on the role. He died in 1933, and I wasn't born until 1935, which is still a long time ago, I know.
You don't know that.
It is a long time ago. But I was born 15 months after he died, but I was born on his birthday. So that happening, my grandmother, she just insisted, I've brought my name with me. So I was called after him Joseph William Foster. So I continued the business. But when he died, his sons took on the business, my uncle and my father. And whatever my grandfather had, they didn't. And they just fought. We didn't know this as kids, but when we grew up, we joined the company. And we used to have national service. So at 18, I went off to do my national service, and my brother Jeff, although he's 2 years older, we went at the same time. And you know, you just left the family, and this is the first time you're away from mother who did everything for you. You start to learn a little about self-sufficiency, looking after yourself, being independent. Well, we came back after 2 years, and we came back to a failing company. J.W. Foster and Sons had a fantastic business with my grandfather. But I don't know whether 2 world wars actually killed them off. They had no spirit to carry on. But the family, that company was going down, it was failing. So Jeff and myself, we had little option but to leave the company. We tried to ask my father, look, you know, we've got to improve. Adidas is coming. They had already taken the football boot market. And believe it or not, my grandfather supplied 96 football clubs with training and football boots in the 20s. And those clubs include Man United, Man City, Arsenal, Chelsea, all the top clubs. He supplied them. Where were they when my father and uncle were working? They'd gone. We'd lost it. And we'd lost it to Adidas. So we were left with no option. And so Jeff and myself decided in 1958 to leave the company. And we set up our company as Mercury Sports Footwear. Great, fantastic. 18 months into our business, our accountant said, you're doing well. Great, you better register that name. Okay, we were a bit naive. We didn't understand. Why do we need to register? Well, you do, because if somebody else starts making Mercury shoes because they thought Mercury shoes were pretty good, you're going to have a problem. So I was told to go and see a patent agent in Manchester, which I did. And he looked up the name Mercury and he came back and said, sorry, Joe, it's already pre-registered with British Shoe Corporation. And British Shoe Corporation were a lot bigger than Reebok, well, than Mercury at that time. So he said, okay, they will sell it to you, but it's for £1,000. We didn't have £1,000. We just set up a whole factory for £250. £1,000, impossible. He said, but you can take them to court because they're not using it, and you can say, you know, we want this name. And I said, how much will that cost? He said, £1,000. Oh, okay, no deal. Okay, he said, so if you can't buy it, you're going to have to bring me another name. He said, but not one name, you're going to have to bring me 10 names. And I'm thinking, 10 names? You know, we've got to be in love with this. This is our company. And he pointed through the window. He pointed to Kodak. It was a nice day in May in Manchester, which it's pretty rare that, but it was. And I said, what's with Kodak? He said, well, Kodak, he said, they made up the name. It's theirs. Nobody can claim it, so great, do a name like that. Well, I go back and we all sit around the table and we're trying to think up names. Cougar Sports, that's a good name, yeah, that's all right. And Falcon, yeah, Falcon Sports, that'd be good. Great, put those down. Now, let me take you back to 1943. I doubt if anybody here remembers that, but in 1943, I was 8 years old, and it was in the middle of World War II. And just like COVID, we couldn't go anywhere. There were no lights on, you could do nothing, but there were local events. And I was entered into an 80-yard race, a sprint. And I won the race. Of course, I had my secret weapon. I had Foster's spike shoes. And nobody else had even heard of spike running shoes. So I won anyway. I won, and I went up to pick up my prize. What did I get? I got a dictionary. I'm 8 years old. I'm saying, where's the football? Yeah, what can I do? I suppose I could kick a dictionary about, but not as much fun as a ball. So I was pretty disappointed at that. And this was a Webster's dictionary. Probably not many of you know Webster's dictionary, but a Webster's dictionary is an American dictionary. So a lot of the spellings are a little bit different than English. However, I'm disgusted, but my dictionary stayed with me somehow. And we come now to 1960, we're looking for a new name, and my dictionary is sat by the side there, and I like the letter R. I don't know why. One of those things, I just like the letter R. So I open my Webster's dictionary at R and start thumbing through. You soon come across R-E, and it was R-E-E-B-O-K. What's that? It's a small South African gazelle. We're a running company. Gazelle. Fantastic. Put that top of the list, Reebok. I go back to my agent, and I give him 10 names. And I said, look, we need this one, Reebok. We've got to be in love with it. It's got to be our passion. But he's a lawyer. He said, okay, see what we can do. 2 weeks later, he rang me and said, Joe, you've got your wish. You can have Reebok. However, there's a caveat. The registrar says if anybody starts making shoes out of Reebok skin, you can't stop them. Well, Jeff and I, my brother, we looked at it and said, that's never going to happen. No, that won't happen. and it didn't. So we got Reebok. But because of that, the registrar said, we've got to put you in Part B of the register. Only 2 months earlier, we didn't even know there was a register, so we didn't care. We're in the B section. However, 10 years later, the registrar came back and said, we moved you to the A section. Okay, why? Well, is that everybody now knows that Reebok is a sports shoe, and the animal has to come second.
Wow, that's fascinating, isn't it? Wow, that's a really amazing story. You know, so when you talk about your grandfather's company, how did all that come about? Where you you joined the company. You talked about that in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, well, my grandfather, he was a cobbler. His grandfather was a cobbler. That's going back a lot time, isn't it? And my grandfather used to go down to him in Nottingham and learn a bit about cobbling, but at the same time, as well as sort of repairing street shoes, he repaired cricket boots. And cricket boots had spikes in the bottom. That long ago, they had spikes in the bottom. And my grandfather asked why. The obvious answer, well, it gives them grip. Good idea. My grandfather was a member of his local Harriers Club in Bolton. And he thought, if I make a nice pair of running shoes and put spikes in the bottom, maybe this will help me. Because grandfather wasn't a good runner. He enjoyed it, but it was sort of midfield on any event that he entered into. However, made himself a pair of shoes, and although on the first attempt they failed, he did make it good, and he became second in one of the races, which was very unlikely. So most of his teammates were looking at him suspiciously, and yeah, I'll make your shoes. So that was the beginning of his business, and he started making running shoes. But as I mentioned earlier, influencing. He gave his shoes to top athletes. And in 1904, a long time ago, Alf Shrub broke 3 world records in his shoes in one event in Glasgow. 1908, grandfather had 2 gold medals at the Olympics in London. And by 1920, we must remember the second generation, a second decade of the 20th century was World War I. So not many running shoes. They just repaired army boots. But grandfather's Belle Epoque was the 20s, the 1920s. We have a letterhead, and some of you are going to get this today. And on that letterhead, it says in 1920, the Olympic Games in Antwerp, he supplied all the athletes. So that was pretty good. But during the 20s, three runners won gold medals. Harold Abrahams, Eric Liddell, and Lord Burleigh. They all won gold medals in the 20s. And some of you may have heard of the film Chariots of Fire. Well, that film was about those 3 athletes, and they all wore Joe Foster's shoes.
Amazing.
So that was a big business. Plus, as I said, on that letterhead you'll find 96 teams, all the league teams. I think there's only one that's not on it. For me, that's Tottenham Hotspur, and I don't know why we weren't supplying Tottenham at that time. Although I do remember when I worked at Foster's, we did supply Tottenham, but obviously not in the 20s. But all those teams, rugby league, rugby union as well. So it was a tremendous business.
You then, Joe, leave J.W. Foster and to set up your own company. So tell us a little bit about that journey.
Well, as I say, the problem is that when Jeff and I joined the business, joined J.W. Foster and Sons, that was okay. We didn't know much. We were teenagers, so you enjoy what normal teenagers do. It's only when we went away and we did national service, coming back from national service, that we realized the company's failing. They didn't have anybody. They didn't have anybody enrolled. They didn't do any marketing. They did a little bit of advertising, but it was failing. And I challenged my father on this. I said, we've got to do something. And he wasn't enthusiastic. In fact, he said, look, when your uncle goes and I go, this company will be yours. You can do what you like with it. I said, Dad, we don't want you to go. That's not the plan. But this company will be gone long before you are. And we've got to do something different. It didn't make any difference. And so Jeff and I, we needed to change. we also went to shoemaking college. We did this in the evenings. And the best thing about that is that we met a lot of people who were in the shoe industry. So when, after a short while, we decided we needed to leave, it wasn't the fact that we learned more about shoemaking, but we made a lot of friends, a lot of people, a lot of contacts. So when we left, if we had a problem, we just asked them. And we built our small factory. It was in an old brewery in the next town, and the top floor, we couldn't use it because the roof was just full of holes. And rain was coming in. We just had buckets and tin cans all over the floor. The ground floor, for whatever reason, whether a brewery needs to have no windows, there were no windows, so we couldn't use that. We used the middle floor, which was a bit dodgy, so we put all our machinery around the edges so that we didn't run the risk of the floor collapsing. But that was our start in Bury. And well, we started with cycle shoes. We didn't want to compete with our parent company, and we did very nicely. But we eventually ended up making running shoes, and we started to expand our business. But the one category we couldn't get into was football. That was the big category, and we couldn't get in there because Adidas, they owned it. It would have cost us too much money. So we stayed with athletics, and we had to grow our company on athletics. The thing about athletics is that all the members of athletic clubs, there was about 400 athletic clubs in the UK, and luckily for us, the 3As, Amateur Athletic Association, they produced a handbook. And the secretaries of every club, the name and address were in the handbook. Great. So I wrote to them, and I offered them 15% off. And if somebody wanted to be an agent, fine, they could get the 15%. I got 100 agents with the first letter, and I got another 50 agents with the second letter, and eventually I ended up with 250 agents. And this was our business. Previous to that, though, I had thought, well, I told my father we need to do some promotion, we need to get out on the road. And in those days, every town had about 3 small sports outfitters. They were usually ex-footballers who ran the business, and I would go around there. I tried to go around there and say, look, I'm Reebok, and they'd look at me and say, who's Reebok? Okay, who's it? Well, I'd show them the shoes. They'd, oh, nice shoes, great, I like it. And then they'd look at the shelves and say, look, I've got Dunlop, I've got Adidas, why do I need Reebok? I must have met that about a dozen times. Why do I need Reebok? Before it dawned on me, they didn't need Reebok. We had to make them need Reebok. And that's when I went to the Athletes Direct. Very shortly after starting our business with the direct trade, I was getting telephone calls from those retailers saying, you're supplying our local athletes. You know, we'll stock your shoes if you'll stop supplying the athletes direct. And I said, no, we're not doing that. You would get wholesale prices, which is less than half the price of what we were selling to the clubs. And we'll advertise that you are stockists, if that's what you do. About 90% of them agreed. They would start to. So we're growing nicely, and we were part of the athletic community, so much so that all the athletes were buying our product, which was great. And eventually, I was approached by a distributor that we'd like to be your distributor, and I thought, well, that's pretty good because it'll give me time to do other things. Because I knew the running market was good. In the north of England, we have a lot of rain, so cross-country, fell running. You know, this was our market. We called it white space. We were looking for something that nobody else was there. So we were taking those markets, which was fantastic. But we could only grow so big. Even with a distributor, we could only grow to a certain size. And not being able to get into football, I turned my attention to America. In America, there are so many universities and colleges that have track teams, and they also have coach. And coach is a god. You can also go to a university on a scholarship. Great. It's a big market. 350 million Americans at that time, and they had great disposable income. We used to look at America as 100, and any comparable market. Japan was about 35, Germany 30, and the UK about 18. So by comparison, that was our market. People say, why didn't you go to Europe? Europe's bigger, got 400 million. But 25, 28 countries, speaking different languages, different cultures. No, it's too difficult. And Adidas and Puma were there. So why would we want to go into that space? For us, the white space was America. It was big. They all spoke, well, nearly spoke English. And so that was an attempt. Okay, so I went to the family and said, look, we better go to America, see what we can do. And they say, no, you can't afford that. We can't afford to send you to America. Okay. So I'm reading a magazine. I think it was called Eurosport. And in that magazine, the government were advertising that we want you to export. And they wanted us to export to America. This was very fortunate because they said, we will pay for you a stand at the NSGA show. That's the National Sporting Goods of America. We'll pay for the stand, we'll pay for your return airfare, and we'll also pay 50% of your hotel bill. Well, no objections, you can go. So that was it. 1968, I took my first trip to America, Chicago, February. Anybody been to Chicago in February?
Cold.
You'll know what it's like. It's freezing. It's so much below freezing, in fact. Okay, but not to worry. I went with a friend, and we took a 2-week ticket. So we went to New York first. I looked at the sports stores. My friend looked at the outdoor stores. And then we carried on to Chicago. Yes, it was cold. And, okay, the Americans love the product. They looked and said, wow, great. Where do we get this? And I'm saying, England. And they're saying, is that New England? No, not New England. England, you know, across the water. Oh, near London. Yeah, near London. I did realize at that time that the way to get into America, I needed a distributor. These small retailers, they wouldn't want to import it. And it was a difficult job to import to America in those days. You have to have paperwork and everything. So this is 1968. When did I get to America? 1979. 11 long years. I had 6 failed attempts. One guy I was working with for 4 years, we still failed. But, you know, this is where luck comes in. In the late 60s, running started to become something small, but started something in America. By 1975, it was big. And with that, there was a magazine called Runner's World. And Runner's World had started off as a single page. And by 1975, it was a 50-page, full-color, wonderful magazine that told everybody where the next 5K, 10K, the next half marathon or marathon event was. Okay. And the guy, Bob Anderson, who published this magazine, he thought he could tell everybody the best shoe in the world that they should buy, the #1 shoe. And it was Nike. We'd expect that. It certainly wasn't Reebok, so it was Nike. Well, Phil Knight, yes, great, wonderful. We think of 350 million Americans, 10% now we're running, that's 35 million. And if 10% of those wanted to buy that #1 shoe, 3.5 million, well, unfortunately, Phil Knight was importing the product. And to turn up the wick and to get 3.5 million, he couldn't do it. So the retail trade were up in arms, you know, what are you doing? We can't get the shoe, everybody wants it. However, Bob Anderson, in his wisdom, decided that next year we'd have another #1 shoe. Again, it wasn't Reebok. We think it may have been New Balance or Brooks or Etonic or whatever. And same again. They couldn't turn up the volume needed. So Bob Anderson, 3rd year, decided he'd change this. And he changed it to star ratings. So we could have 3, 4, maybe 5 5-star shoes, which I knew we could make a 5-star shoe. To get a #1 shoe, difficult, because that was a bit of a lottery, that. And if you didn't pay enough advertising money to Runner's World, I don't think we would have been anywhere near. So, but we could make a 5-star shoe, at least. That's what I thought. So we're in, this is 1978, and we then sort of started to produce a shoe which I thought would be 5 stars. We tested this out in Edmonton at the Empire Games. Sorry, not Empire anymore, is it? It was the Commonwealth Games. We tested these out at the Commonwealth Games, and we got a shed load of medals. We did well. And so by February 1979, I had my 5-star shoe that I thought at the NSJ show, and we're ready to go. Okay, running was so big in those days that everybody wanted to get into it. And Kmart, I don't know if you know Kmart. Kmart's a very big retailers in America. They came along and the guy said, we want 25,000 pairs. Okay, that's 6 months' work for our small factory in the UK. But we'd pre-thought this. If we do get a 5-star, we're going to need help. And I knew a lot of people in the business, and in particular, I knew a guy who was developing the sports division for Bata. I don't know if you know Bata. They used to be very big in the UK. They're still big in India and Latin America, and they're still the biggest shoemakers in the world. So they said, yeah, look, Joe, no problem. We'll help. We'll make shoes for you. And that's good. But then the guy from Kmart said, but we need a better price. Okay. Bata can make it at a better price, but not the price they want. They could do better than we could. But what they were talking about, we needed to go to Asia. We needed to go to South Korea. And again, having pre-thought all this, I had met up with the agents for a large Korean factory, who their agent was in London. And we'd already given them samples of our 5-star shoe, and they were going to make some samples. So, right, that's good. 25,000 pairs. We can meet the price. We can now meet the quantity. That's okay, fine. But towards the end of the show, another guy came on and said, you know, I'd like to have a look at your shoes. And this guy was called Paul Fireman. Paul Fireman, he ran a business called Boston Camping. Excuse me. And he ran this with his brother and his brother-in-law. And Boston Camping, they sold fishing rods, tents, you name it, everything, all the outdoor stuff. And, okay, but I liked him. I could talk to him. And I could see he was really fed up with doing what he was doing. They'd been doing it for 10 years, and they were selling the same stuff, and about the same amount every year. And he said, you know, if you can get a 5-star shoe, I said, Paul, come and have a look at my shoe. This is going. He said, yeah, but it's not 5 stars yet, is it? No, but you know, we do sort of think we could do well in the next edition, the next shoe edition for Runner's World. And Paul was, okay, I'm impressed, he said. But he said, if you get that 5-star shoe, I'll become your distributor. Okay. So this is February 79, and the shoe edition comes out at the end of July, the August edition at the end of July. I go across to America in between and go and see Kmart, and see the guy who saw me was one of 100 buyers in this big warehouse, and I'm thinking, oh, you know, this might be 25,000 pairs of shoes, but it might be my first and last, because if we don't match the requirements they have for the square footage they're going to give us, that will be it. Okay, so I go along to see Paul in Boston. And I meet his brother and his brother-in-law, nice little company. And I'm thinking, yes, we could bolt on nicely. Reebok would be great here. Okay, so I go back. And now we're at the last week in July, and I pick up the phone to Paul. I said, Paul, can you just nip down to the local kiosk? I'm sure it'll have a Runner's World. Just see if we did get our 5 stars. Because in those days, Runner's World was not available in the UK until a month too late, so we didn't know, and nobody was telling us. Paul came back to me 1 hour later. Joe, Aztec, 5 stars. Wow. That was it. All of a sudden, we had the entry into America. But not only that, Inca was a spike shoe we'd entered into this for Runner's World to check over. That got 5 stars. And Midas, which was a racing shoe, that got 5 stars. So we had 3 5 stars to enter America. And that was our first trip we got into America.
Wow. I mean, how did you feel after all of that? I mean, that sounds so impressive. By that, you know, particularly trying to take on a country like America. How did you feel and the team feel when you slaved away, you had failure after failure, and suddenly you had that breakthrough. What was that emotional feeling like?
Well, I mean, after 11 years of trying, and we spent a lot of time building our company, and we got it fairly nice. I'd got distributors by then in the UK, and I could spend some time. Yeah, I mean, that was probably the big moment for me. There were other moments to come, mind you, but that was the big moment. We're in America. Great. And fabulous, you know. And our business started to grow then. And I knew if we got into America, we would be impressing a lot of people, because I mentioned the NSGA show. It was big, the National Sporting Goods Show in Chicago. Everybody from around the world would attend it, from every country, because whatever happened in America, they wanted to see it firsthand. And then they would try and get in on that same product. So I knew that would be good for us. But we were growing nicely. But running wasn't the secret, or wasn't the growth for Reebok. We had a lot of reps around the country, and we had a tech rep. A tech rep doesn't sell. A tech rep goes into the different stores and meets with the sales guys, and he just tells them what the good parts are of your product. So that's it. This guy's Arnold Martinez. In fact, he actually tried out for the USA Olympics team. He was very good. And his wife Frankie, she's coming home, and she's full of excitement and whatever, and with her friends they're going to these classes. And Arnold said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, we're doing aerobics." And he said, "What's aerobics?" Well, she said, we're actually exercising to music, and it's fantastic. Oh, okay. Arnold went to the next class, and he saw the instructor. She's wearing a pair of sneakers. We think they were New Balance. Half the class are wearing the same shoe. The other half, no shoes at all. Okay, this is Arnold's light bulb moment. Why don't we make an aerobic shoe for women on a woman's last, women's sizes, and make it in glove leather so it's so comfortable and lovely to put on? Fantastic. Great idea. So he took the next flight he could up to Boston to have a word with Paul Fireman. And he's so excited. And he's saying, "Paul, aerobics, we've got to do something." And Paul saying, slow down, Arnold. We're a running company. Why do we want to be making dancing shoes for girls? Well, why indeed? And try as he may, but Paul said to him, "Look, keep your eye on it. And if it seems to be something we should get involved with, okay, we'll give it a try." Didn't satisfy Arnold. No. He went round to the back door, and he met up with Steve Liggett. Steve Liggett was our product man. He did a better job with Steve Liggett. And he got 200 pairs of sample, nice, white, cushioned, glove leather, aerobic shoes, made on a woman's last. He took these down to Los Angeles, and he gave them to the instructors, and he gave them to some of the leading girls, and they loved them. They loved them so much, they didn't just use them for the aerobics. They went to work in them. They started to use them on the street. They were fabulous. However, one problem. They were made out of glove leather. Now, glove leather is 0.7 of a millimeter thick. Not very thick at all. And when you take the top surface off, so you can put some glue on to stick the sole on, we end up with 0.5 millimeter. That's not thick at all. I didn't know about this at the time. I'm a shoemaker. So I didn't know anything about it. They were making these out of glove leather. And Arnold is a marketing man. So we're now talking about marketing over shoemaking. Fantastic, yes. But these shoes fell apart. After 1 month, they were just falling apart. However, the girls loved them that much, they went out and bought another pair. Fantastic. Had that been anywhere else, I think in the world, Reebok would have been dead at that moment because they wouldn't have got out and bought another pair. So I got to hear about this, and I said, well, look, you don't make shoes out of glove leather. You make gloves out of glove leather. It doesn't work that way. It's too much. Yeah, okay, right. So what did they do? we're talking about marketing again now. They lined the glove leather with nylon. Okay, nylon was strong, took the pressure, and I'm saying, you can't do that, because leather, you use leather because it breathes. And now you've just stuck nylon on the back of it, and that stops it breathing. Oh. So what did they do? They punched holes in the front of the shoe so that it would breathe. So, again, marketing win again. Fantastic. And, okay, but we were growing nicely. It took us about 2 months to cure the problem by using what was more like garment leather. So the garment leather was thicker, and it could stand the shoemaking machinery that we had to use. It could stand that. And so we were fine. So now we got the shoes right, and everybody loved them. And then when Jane Fonda went out and actually bought a pair of Reeboks to use in her workout videos, that was it. The whole thing went crazy. All of Hollywood, they were all buying the shoes. It was fantastic. And we, at that point, we were a $9 million business. In the 60s, that was a nice size of business. However, 12 months later, we were a $30 million business.
Wow.
After another 12 months, a $90 million business, then a $300 million business, then a $900 million business. In under 5 years, we'd gone from almost zero to almost $1 billion. And that was fantastic. Our biggest problem, initially it was money, because going to the Far East, you need to provide letters of credit and stuff like that. You don't get a credit line, so we had to work out how to get a credit line. And Stephen Rubin of Pentland, he had a company called ASCO, and they gave us a credit line. So that was great. But it was getting from 300 million to 900 million. If you can imagine the numbers of product that you need to do that, it's fantastic. We're talking about 5 million pairs a month. You know, it's a lot of shoes. And the factories couldn't expand like that. But we were lucky again. Nike hit a wall. Nike had been growing incredibly fast, but all of a sudden the inventory was over the top of the roof of the warehouse. They had to pull out. And they pulled out of 3 factories, we moved in. And if that hadn't have happened, we would have probably starved our market. Other people would have come in. But no. So Reebok are now almost $1 billion. And for that length of time, we'd almost forgotten how to sell shoes because we didn't need to. It was a matter of how do you make the product rather than go and collecting orders. You had to stop the guys going in. No, you can't get any more orders. They're just coming in faster than we can cope with. So at that time, we then went into tennis, went into basketball, we went into American football, and the company grew to about 3.6 billion. And at that point, we were bigger than Adidas, and bigger than Nike. We were number one. We were the top, number one brand in the world. Fantastic. So when we talk about, you know, what are the moments that you remember, those fantastic moments? Yes, getting the 5-star shoe, that was a fantastic achievement. That was great. But becoming number one, we were the number one brand, sports brand in the world. That was really fabulous. And on top of that, I was hosting a pro celebrity tennis tournament in Monte Carlo, and we had all the celebrities that you can name almost from LA. We had Frank Sinatra, we had Sean Connery, we had Roger Moore, we had Jane Seymour. In fact, she became my tennis partner for a while. We didn't win anything, but...
So, Joe, would you say that its celebrity endorsement has had quite a big pivotal change? I mean, you mentioned Jane Fonda there, but it sounds like even with the sporting athletes earlier on, they've all, you know, people wearing and talking about these products that have got great engaged audiences have had quite a profound impact on the brand.
Well, we're now talking about business, and we're talking about marketing, and we're talking about influencers. And yeah, we started off using influencers like a lot of other. Adidas were using footballers, but it was all performance in those days. So they were using performance. Reebok were the first to move out of performance and into entertainment. And so the Hollywood stars were in Reebok. That began to influence. And that's moved to music, it's moved to all sorts of things now. And even now we have collabs or collaborations. And these collaborations, they are, well, we know now that sport is influencing street. We're now fashion companies. It's high fashion, everything on the street now, not everything, but the bulk of what's on the street now is influenced by sport. So this is where it's gone. And okay, we did. I moved back. I stepped back in 1990 because we were number one, and all I was doing is flying around the world 3 times a year, being picked up by a limousine, going to the best hotels, dining at the best restaurants. I'm meeting all these people from Hollywood. It was fantastic. What a life. It's great. But I'm thinking, this won't last forever, and it's better if I step back a bit now and just take it easy. That was in 1990, which I did.
Yeah. What's the value of the company now, Joe?
It's hard to say what the value is now because let's say what happened. In 2005, sometime in the early 2000s, the company seemed to plateau. It seemed to go flat. We didn't have the right person leading the company, and a decision was made to sell, and they sold the company to Adidas. Okay, it was the wrong thing as far as Reebok were concerned. As far as Adidas were concerned, they loved it because they managed to take the NFL and the NBA licenses and take them to Adidas. You can't blame Adidas. They paid $3.5 billion for the company. That's a lot of money. And really, Adidas didn't do Reebok any good, but you can't expect them to be building Reebok. But Reebok survived quite nicely. Adidas changed some things, but somebody in Adidas who came in and said, why are you doing this with Reebok? Change it back to where it was. Change the silhouette back, because they changed it. Change the lettering back. So for the last 5 years, it's been slowly improving because people recognize the brand again. However, Adidas decided to sell. Last year, they decided to sell them, and by March of this year, they actually sold the company to ABG, which is Authentic Brands Group. An Authentic Brands Group have 40 brands. They're a big company. However, Reebok, they paid $2.5 billion for Reebok. And that's their biggest company. So Reebok is the biggest company. And ABG, they do things a bit differently. They're more a licensing company. I used to license the distributors in different countries, but now they take it on. They're licensing the biggest retailers because the retail business now has come together. And as we know, JD Sports, who are one of the new licensees, JD Sports now are a £7 billion company. So they've got 5,000 outlets. So Reebok are now licensed to 21 outlets, and there must be some 30,000 stores globally now that will expose the Reebok brand. They bought the company when it was doing $1.5 billion in revenue. They paid $2.5 billion for it. By the end of 23, they're expecting the company to be $5 billion.
Wow.
By 2030, they're expecting the company to be $10 billion. And they're progressive. They're working hard. We're already back in football in Latin America. So this is what is happening with Reebok. And it's going to be great.
It's exciting, isn't it, really, when you hear the early stories and where it's really gone to now. I'm really conscious to get some questions in from the audience because I'm sure there's going to be some. But can we just give Joe a big round of applause for what I think has been a really illuminating session this evening. I just want to check to see if there's anybody that's used the slido at all. Oh, there we go, quite a lot. Right, Joe, here we go. Did you ever compare yourself to others throughout your career? If so, who and why?
Well, no, I think I mentioned looking for white space. That anybody here who's looking to build a company, sorry, it's not build anymore, it's scale.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, we built our company, now you scale your company. We learned this because we do things with universities. We do conversation, and they're on these courses, the MBA courses. Oh no, we scale our company. We also pivot now. We don't change direction. we know pivot. And did we compare ourselves? Well, as I say, we looked for white space because we knew that if we tried to do something better than Adidas in football, that would have been too difficult. You know, we tried different things, but we didn't punish ourselves. We just looked for that white space. And the white space came, America for me was a white space because people were running, the market was big. And aerobics was the biggest white space that we could find. So we looked for something different. And our influence came from Hollywood, from entertainment, not from performance. You know, it wasn't sort of taking on. We did take a lot of athletes on. Don't get me wrong, but really we knew that to find growth, scale, we needed to find new ways, new places, to innovate. You know, I go to America quite a lot now, and we're talking about the book. We haven't mentioned much about the book, you know, but
it's coming, isn't it?
We can come to the book. Yes, we can come to the book because it does give much more insight into what we did as Reebok. But I go to America, and now a lot of Americans are in late 40s, early 50s. What do they remember? Apart from the women who remember aerobics, the guys remember the pump. The pump was fantastic, and they all remember. And these guys saying, I was a kid at the time, and everybody in school, we all wanted the pump, but it was so expensive. And we'd say, Mum, Dad, I want. No, you can't have those. Go and get a pair of Converse. They're too expensive. So they had to get a job. They had to deliver newspapers, do whatever to get a job, so they could get a pair of Reebok pump. And I don't know if anybody here, but in America, it's one of the best advertisements that ever happened. D. Brown, he was a basketball player, and he was stood on the center line, and this was just a competition where they dunked the ball, and he dunked the ball from the halfway line, then bent down and pumped up his shoes, and everybody remembers that advert. So. You know, we were not looking to do things to beat our competitors. We were looking to find space. And I think anybody who has a business today, you know, you can follow other people, but if you really want to scale your business, look for the white space. Look for that little bit of difference. It doesn't need to be a big thing, but it can make a big difference to your business.
What wise words there. So another question we've got is, who in your life started the entrepreneurial spirit in yourself?
Well, people ask me, are you born an entrepreneur, or can you become an entrepreneur? Can you learn? For me, you're either born an entrepreneur or not, because an entrepreneur is an optimist. So either you're born optimistic or not. And if you're born pessimistic or indifferent, you'll find it difficult, because as an entrepreneur, to get on in life, you've got to take risks. Not ridiculous risks. You're not gambling, but you are taking risks. And you've got to be willing to think, yeah, I can do that. Yeah. I want to do that. And you may fail. But if you do fail, that's not the end. That's just a lesson. That's just a beginning. Wow, yeah, didn't get that right, did I? You know, and you pick yourself up, and there's another job out there. There's something else. So, but you've learned a lesson. You've learned what's better next. So, an entrepreneur, you've got to be optimistic. You really have to be optimistic, and yeah, because every day is not a good day. Some of those days are really, you know, they really are a trial. But you come out of it, and you think, yeah, we had to change our name. We had to change our silhouette, and we did that because we looked at these problems as an opportunity. So that's what you've got to be, and an optimist, I think you're born.
No, wise words again. And you've obviously proved that when you went to America and how tough that was. And in fact, the next question sort of alludes to that. What advice do you have for other business owners for when times are hard? And we may be facing a more challenging period now. What advice would you give to them?
Well, I think you can look at COVID as being one of the most terrible experiences that most people have been through. And yet, like with world wars, you know, necessity is the mother of invention. And that occurred. We now have Zoom. You know, these things come out of problems. Somebody finds an answer. So okay, we may not all be able to find the answer to the problem, but if you just think as an optimist, how can I make the changes? You've got to be optimistic. You've got to look for that difference. You've got to pivot, because if what you're doing isn't working anymore, you've got to look for something different. And it's easy for me to say that, but to be honest, life isn't that easy that you can just pick something up. You've got to look hard, and you've got to work hard for it. But if you do, and like I say, you look at Zoom now. I mean, at Reebok, we went to Reebok, and nobody's working there anymore. And when they are in, they're sitting in their office and they Zoom each other. Yes.
From the office?
From the office, yeah. They don't bother meeting anymore. They just Zoom. Yeah. So, life has changed. Accept it.
Yeah, okay. What Reebok product do you think has influenced popular culture the most, and why?
Well, at the most, what happened is that once Reebok started to use soft leather, this went into all the sports, into tennis. In tennis in particular, it was Paul Feynman's idea, or at least his advertising agent's idea. They decided that they would advertise the nice, soft tennis shoes. And it was, if you don't believe these are the best tennis shoes you've ever worn, we'll give you your money back and a can of balls. And the strap line was, Reebok puts their balls on the line. and the biggest influence I think we had was actually introducing soft leather, so that people didn't need to break the shoes in. A lot of shoes, a lot of sports shoes in particular, you'd almost worn them out before it actually became comfortable. Well, as now, and a lot of people know now, because a lot of people are walking around in a nice, soft, I do now, it's so much easier, that you don't have to break the shoes in. So I think the soft leather and that wonderful comfort and cushioning, Reebok brought that to the sports business.
Yeah, no, I agree. What was the tipping point that made you make the decision to sell the business?
Well, I think, how many of you had heard of Joe Foster before tonight? One, two, maybe three. Not many.
A secret?
Well, for me, it wasn't a question of selling Joe Foster. It was a matter of selling Reebok. Reebok was the name. We wanted success. We were making a brand. We go to these universities, and they've got the NBA students, and they say, Joe, what was your exit plan? Exit plan? We didn't have an exit plan. Why? Now, it's exit plans. Why is it exit plans? Because as a business in the 1950s, 1960s, we were looking for money. We needed money. We were product looking for money. Today, it's money looking for products. There are so many ways that you can obtain money, but they're looking for products. And so in order to put money in that product, they want to know its exit plan, because they want to be able to put the money in and get the money out, so they need that. In my day, that didn't happen. We just wanted to grow the company. So when it comes to saying, did you know Joe Foster? No, because as far as I was concerned, how far can we take this company? And there comes a time when I knew that in order for us to really take advantage of the opportunities, I had to sell the company. I had to let people in. And so letting people in allowed Reebok to become number one. And people say, do you regret that? And I said, we became number one. What's to regret? And that was my philosophy. Okay, maybe I could have made an awful lot more money, or maybe Reebok would have never made what it made. Maybe nobody would know of Reebok if I hadn't made that decision. So many CEOs have gone in Reebok, but I'm still a founder. They can't get rid of me.
It's the coolest job, actually, isn't it? How was your relationship with Phil Knight? Would you say that you had a Steve Jobs and Bill Gates dynamic?
Simply, I never met him. I don't know. I never met him. That is still to happen. Paul Feynman met him because he was on the same market, but of course I was global. He was just USA.
Somebody else says here, what were your friends doing when you were growing Reebok? Did you ever have a fear of missing out?
Well, I think my friends were making money. I was just spending a lot of time trying to make money and trying to develop a brand. And I don't think anybody envied us until, of course, the time came when we did break through. Then, those things just happen at one time. But God, the amount of time you spend getting there, the effort you spend getting there, and that's, we come back to an entrepreneur, we come back to the energy you need, you come back to the enthusiasm, and back to being an optimist. You've just got to keep on smiling. Not every day is a good day, but when people say, what are the most important things about running a business and growing a business, scaling a business like that, and I say having fun. That's the most important. And the second most important is having more fun. And the third, much more fun. So just have fun. And if you're having fun, you'll probably be very successful. But make sure that you don't try and make something happen that shouldn't happen. That's the time to pivot. That's the time to change whatever you're doing.
Yeah, no, I agree. Highest grossing shoe?
I would think that was the aerobics freestyle, because that was the one that really made it. It was a fabulous shoe. It took a while to get into Europe, because Europe were not used to women in Europe were not used to spending so much money on a sports shoe. Heels, yeah, but a sports shoe, no. And I think there was a lot of opposition. But in America, it didn't matter. This is why, one of the reasons, if you want to scale your business, if you want to do that, America's a good place to look at. And it's a good place, because money isn't a problem. If you've got a good product, you will sell it. And that's the big lesson I learned. And anybody who asks me about where should we go next, America. Try America.
What would have happened to Reebok if your team member hadn't taken up the class with his wife?
Hadn't taken up?
Taking up the class with his wife. The aerobics class.
Oh, right, I'm sorry. Well, when we try and talk about changing history, it's one of those things that there's no answer to. It happened. It happened. I mean, who can forecast what would have happened if it hadn't? It's like if I hadn't decided that we need to let people in the company because we need the money. You don't take the opportunity. The opportunity came along. Adidas and Nike, they thought, no, it's going to be a fad. There's no such thing as a woman's sports brand. It's all male, sweaty, and that's what everybody thought about this. That with Reebok, we're a small running company. We're not known nationally or globally. So when Reebok started making aerobics, we became a woman's shoe. We became a woman's company. And that made the difference. The women owned Reebok. They loved it. It was great. And we didn't have the problem, if it's a problem, that Nike and Adidas had of being male, sweaty. No. This was owned by women. So, yes, what would have happened? I don't know. Maybe we'd have found a different white space. But who knows? When you found something and you've got it, we found it. Yeah. We don't want to go back and think if we hadn't found it, why waste our time?
What's the split at the moment between men and women in terms of shoes sold?
Well, I think when you talk about sports footwear, it's got to be, the majority's got to be men. But I think women are finding a different place in sport these days, and I think it's becoming accepted. Things do change, and I really don't know why Reebok didn't take out women's football, which is big in America. It's now soccer, of course, in America, and soccer in America is bigger than the men's game. It's a non-contact sport. And it's grown, but what's the split? Well, I don't know. I think now that everything's on the street and everything's fashion, you're probably not far from 50-50 now.
Is it?
Because
okay.
when you really think everybody, even Julie's wearing, she's not wearing Reebok today, but she's wearing a sports influence product.
But you are wearing a Reebok today.
I'm wearing Reebok today.
And they've got a personalised branding on as well, with Joe's name on. It's pretty cool. So you've got to go and take a picture of that later.
They've got my initials on, yes.
You got their initials, yeah.
And 1895, which is
when it started, yeah.
Which is when grandfather invented his spike running shoe. So we in America they think that's great, fantastic that we've got a history that goes back to 1895. It didn't happen quickly. It took a long time for them to realise that there's some value in tradition.
I've got to finish with, and somebody's asked the question, but I think a lot of us would love to know who, you're obviously a driven and very successful entrepreneur, but who has inspired you?
Well, I think when we became entrepreneurs or we left the family company, what we needed a job because we could see the one that we were in was going to disappear. But I think then we come back to DNA. And whilst I believe my father and my uncle didn't inherit grandfather's DNA, I think somewhere that DNA got straight through, and I probably have that DNA because I am an optimist. And I believe in human nature, even though in many occasions you get let down by humans. But I still believe it. I'm still happy to meet people and believe that they're good people. And, so where does it come from? I think, again, you're born with it. I think it's something that you have. And it's difficult to try to learn. I think it's something that you either have it, you're either an optimist and you're really ready to take the world on. Okay. I can speak now because we were successful. I guess if we'd have failed, no, we never have failed. How could we fail? No.
You'd have just learned, wouldn't you?
Yeah. We couldn't fail. It had to happen.
So Joe Foster, the eternal optimist, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Redefined podcast. We want to bring you the best stories from the top changemakers across the globe. To make that possible, please subscribe to the podcast wherever you are listening and leave a comment or review. It really is that simple. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you for the next episode.